Hi guys, I'm so excited to show you how to make bread. This is the time that we need the substance of homemade bread right now. It's so easy and it's going to be fun for you and the kids or whoever to throw a loaf of bread. Now this is not advanced techniques. This is a basic bread that's going to turn out for everybody. There's tons of other bread recipes of all different levels of experience, but this is a nice basic beginning bread. So don't panic, have fun, and we're going to post the recipe, and if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Also, afterwards, if you make this bread tonight or tomorrow and you're having a problem, just give me a message on Facebook. I'll be happy to answer you, okay? So, the first thing you want to do with bread making is get yourself started with your ingredients. It's really important, especially when you're working as a family with kids, you want to have everything laid out before you call the kids into the kitchen. Nothing's more frustrating than having everything and missing that one main ingredient that's going to make or break your recipe. So have everything prepared, call the gang in, and then start mixing and playing, okay? So the first thing we're going to do is flour. I'm going to be adding 3 cups of all-purpose flour here. Yes, you can use bread flour if you're home. You might have to add a little more liquid, but all-purpose flour works the best. It works great. So one cup. Do you see how I did that? I filled the cup up with flour. I did not pack it down. You want it nice and fluffy in there. And then I'm going to just level off the top. That's 1 level cup of flour. That's number 2. And
we will be posting the recipe too.
Yes, we're going to be posting the recipe. And this is level number 3. Okay? In the bakery, we tend to weigh everything, so that's why I put down the 12 ounces. If you have a scale at home, it's always going to be more accurate to use the weight. But if you don't have a scale, it's no big deal. You're going to just measure out 3 level cups, not packed, nice and fluffy. All right, the next thing we're going to do is yeast. So this is the kind of yeast you're going to buy in the supermarket. It comes in little packets. It's going to be much easier for you to use than to use like fresh yeast or anything like that. I know some people are interested in learning breads that don't take yeast because that's not something that's in the house. Bread that doesn't have yeast in it, that rises, is basically called quick breads. Okay, and you know what a quick bread is? A muffin. So any recipe that you see online that is for muffins can work for quick bread. What you're doing is you're just putting it in a loaf pan, and what's going to change is the length of time you bake it. Okay? So that would be for that question. Again, I have no problem answering anything else that you have. One very important thing to remember when you're making bread. Don't ever wear black. Okay? When you see what I look like after we do this process, you're going to know why. All right, so I'm going to be adding 2 teaspoons of yeast. I think a little bit more than that comes in a packet. I think it's 2.5 teaspoons. You don't want to overboard with the yeast because it does add like a little bit of a funky, yeasty flavor to your bread. So you don't want to go crazy. I know it's that little 1/2 ounce and you're like, oh, I take a teaspoon. I don't want to waste it. Just roll up the bag and save it. You're going to see how easy this bread recipe is to make, so I'm sure you're going to do it more than once. All right, so we have our yeast in there and we have our flour, and now I'm going to add salt, a 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and I'm going to just toss that around, just like that. I want to get the yeast dispersed evenly. Okay, so now what I'm going to start adding is the wetter ingredients, okay? This type of stuff is going to be fine there. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of honey. You can add sugar if you don't have honey available. Of course, we're using local Pocono honey because that's my son Eric, who's the beekeeper. And I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of honey. Sugar works great too, but this day and age you want to kind of be as natural. Okay, so honey can get a little sticky at times. You see here, a little trick, if that bothers you, is give it a little squirt of Pam before you put the honey in there, and then it will come right out. Or spray your spoon with Pam, or cooking spray, and then that will, not allowed to use any brands. All right, and then I'm going to also take 1 tablespoon of oil here. I'm going to be using oil in the bowl that we're going to let the dough rise in too. But I did that here first. The dough for the bowl rising is basically going to be a coating, so it's a little bit different. All right, so now I'm going to be adding water, and it's going to be about 120 degrees. This is really important. You can't put cold water in here because the yeast will not activate. If you do it too hot, the yeast is going to die, because yeast, believe it or not, these little kernels, that's a living thing in there, guys. That comes to life when it comes in contact with water and food, which would be its sugar. So you definitely can't throw too much hot water in there. So I have a thermometer here, and I'm going to take the thermometer. But how you can do it at home if you don't have a digital thermometer is get the tap water as hot as possible. Most people have tap water at 120 degrees. Some people who really like hot baths will turn up the furnace a little bit hotter, so that might be too hot for you. If that's the case, then you're going to add some cold water. Putting my finger in there, I should be able to take it, like if I leave my finger in there for 3 seconds, I should be able to leave my finger in there for 3 seconds, is what I'm saying. If you have to pull it out right away, then that means it's too hot. Then you add a couple of drops of cold water. So I am going to take a spatula, and when you're working with kids, get a big bowl. Don't be using little tiny bowls because they're going to make a mess. When my kids were little, I used those Tupperware What's-A bowls or That's-A bowls or some crazy thing. They're really big. Even if they were making 3 eggs or something, I let them do it in that bowl because the mess just stayed in there. So I'm going to be adding a cup of water first. I have extra here so I don't have to run away from you guys. This is a cup and a half. So I'm going to add about a cup. Okay. That wasn't quite a cup. So what happens here is I want a dough that is not going to be super firm. You want it to be a little sticky and soft. If it's very firm, then that means you're going to get a very dense spread. Might not really taste that good. So you want to have it a little fluffy. So this is still too dense. So I'm going to add a little bit more water and throw that in there. So why don't I just throw the 1.5 cups of water in there? I can, but then the dough might be a little too soft for me to handle. So you know what? For today's purposes, I'm going to do that. Just so that you can overcome.
You're a wild woman, Mom.
Hey, I'd rather have them see what could possibly happen, and other than having it not work out. All right, so I'm mixing this dough, and you see it's kind of like a little bit on the soft side. It's actually looking like my Spätzle dough. All right, so this is a little too soft. If I poured this into a loaf pan that I sprayed with cooking spray, then that would be perfectly fine. You get a nice loaf of bread. That's not an issue. But since I want to make a fun loaf of real old-fashioned rustic-looking bread like this, I want it to be a little stiffer. So I'm going to take a little more flour and a cookie sheet. Best invention in the world. I love these cookie sheets because it's kind of like a little desk. So everything you do on here, or I do on here, the mess stays contained. It's a lot easier to bring this over to the sink and wash it out than it is to scrub glue, in essence, flour and water off of your kitchen table. Okay, so I'm going to sprinkle some flour on here, and I'm going to pour this dough on top. This is too thin, guys. You don't want it this thin. But if it happens, we're just going to add a little more flour, and it's going to be fine. All right, so now this is called the kneading stage. What I'm doing is I'm folding and I'm pressing. Folding and pressing. Try to toss it around. Folding and pressing. If my dough consistency was better here, I would definitely not be adding more flour here because you don't want to get to the point where you add too much flour either. You could get a little carried away here because it's fun to do this. All right, the dough is so nice and warm on my hands right now. This is literally therapy, guys. Okay, so if you're mad at your hubby or somebody, just make a loaf of dough and take it out all on here, and you'll feel good. And then it's going to taste so much better when you take it out of the oven. Have a big slab of butter on there. It's going to be good. Okay. So now you can see the dough consistency is perfect. This is what I want. I want it to be nice and firm, but yet soft. And I'm gonna just fold it again, give it a little knead, fold it again. So the reason why I fold it like this and that is because I'm trying to evenly disperse the flour and the yeast and everything else. I don't want to just mish it all up. Can you do it in a mixer? Of course you can. But I find that the crumb of the bread is always a little bit finer, so it's not, and when finer doesn't always mean better, guys, just so you know that. All right, so now, folding it one more time. When you get a nice smooth dough, if anyone took the mozzarella class, you're gonna see that this is what I do with the mozzarella too. Make a nice ball. It's a little on the sticky side. All right, so there you go. So you have a nice smooth batch of dough. So I'm supposed to have a nice clean bowl here, which I forgot to bring. So I'm gonna just take this bowl. It's all right. Got to work with what you got. I'm gonna take a little oil, pour it in the bottom of the bowl, just about a tablespoon. Take this dough, smooth side down, and then I'm gonna flip it. And that's what you got right there. So I am going to put this dough in a nice warm spot with a nice clean dish towel over it, because you don't want it to get a draft. It sounds crazy, but believe it or not, if you get a big cold draft along this bread as it's rising, it flattens out. It doesn't like to get cold, like my grandmother. Okay, there you go. All right, I'm actually a grandmother already, so. Okay, so here we go. That's what you're gonna do. This is the waiting game. You have to wait about an hour for that to rise and come up. So in the meantime, what I did, like they do on TV, is I made a nice big dough. And it doubled in size, okay? So your dough, this is actually a double recipe, so yours not gonna have this much dough. It's gonna be literally half of this. This is when you call the kids in because you get to punch it down. Woo, look at that. It's like the blob, okay? So I made a big blob of dough like this so I can show you can do different things with it, all right? So one of the things you're gonna do is take a nice clean tray. I'm gonna take a piece of this dough. And at this stage, you can get a little crazy at this stage. So you can make rolls, you can do all kinds of different things. It doesn't matter how rough you are here because we're gonna let it rise again. So on this one, I'm going to, kids are gonna love this. I don't know if the moms are gonna like it. But I'm gonna spread it out like this. This is gonna give me a nice big surface that I can put all kinds of goodies in there. This is how you make cinnamon bread. You can sprinkle cinnamon and raisins on here. You can sprinkle pesto and sun-dried tomatoes, garlic powder. You can do seasoned breads. You can do pepperoni and low moisture mozzarella. A lot of different things you can do at this stage. But what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna include some M&Ms. M&Ms, this is a dessert bread, guys. Okay, so I'm just putting a lot, I'm not gonna overload it, okay? I'm just putting enough M&Ms so that when it melts, when it opens, gets in the oven and it cooks, there's gonna be little chunks of chocolate. And the chocolate's probably gonna melt into the bread. And that's perfectly fine because it's gonna be like a cinnamon bread with chocolate in it. All right, now, I have to roll this up. I'm gonna take one end of it, and I'm lefty, I have to roll it towards me, but if it's more comfortable for you, you can roll it away from you, it's no big deal. I'm basically gonna just fold, and fold, and fold, and roll it up nice and carefully. All right? And then I'm gonna place it on a parchment-lined cookie sheet. Of course, I didn't bring my parchment.
Carly, can you wrap us up?
Get me a couple of cookie sheets with parchment, thanks, Carl. All right, so here you have this. That's perfectly fine. If you want to get really more creative, you can roll it up like a snake. Now this little end here, if I leave that like that, when it bakes, it's gonna just explode out. So you always tuck the little end underneath the bread, just like that. Almost looks like a little bit of a heart, doesn't it? I could actually shape it into a heart. There you go. Oh, look at that. Okay, thank you, Polly. All right. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to plop this onto here. I'm going to do a couple of different things. So now, what I want to do is I want to brush my bread with some egg white and a little bit of water. And what that does is it gives a nice finished crust on it. If you don't do this, is the bread going to be delicious? Absolutely. It's just not going to look nice and rustic like that. I could sprinkle this with sugar if I wanted to, crystal sugar. You know, Easter time's coming. You can sprinkle different pink or yellow or whatever you want to do. And then what I do is I take a scissor. Here we go. And I make little cuts. And again, you can get creative with this. You can cut people's initials in there. You can do all different kinds of things. We're going to let this rise for about 20 minutes before we pop it in a 400-degree oven. So I'm going to put that over here for now, because now I'm going to take another piece of dough. And at this stage, you don't need any more flour, okay? Because it's oil covered. The dough is nice and pliable. This is where you can let the kids get fun too. You can cut this in. You can create shapes. Here I'm going to make a little head. Make a little body. Okay, and the dough is going to kind of stick to itself at this stage. All right, you can't mess up. If you let the dough rise the way it's supposed to rise, it's going to look great. That's all there is to it. And here's the other little hand. But I do want to mention too, you can't play with this for a half an hour. It's got to just be a few minutes. Let them make a quick shape. Or you create a quick shape, make your initial or whatever you want to do. Here, I'm going to make a bear. Stick ears on them. All right. And then big fat legs. The other thing too that I want to mention is try to keep the shape uniform. In other words, you notice I made big fat legs here and big fat arms, because if I would make skinny little arms on the bear, then what'll happen is those guys will turn into pretzel sticks in the oven, because they'll be too small and they have to bake. You have to get the whole bread baked, so that's going to happen there. So there is the bear. Then what I can do is I can take a couple little raisins. Press them in there really well. Give them a nose. Give them some belly buttons. Or I'll give them one belly button down there. All right, I'll give him a smile. Got to smile during these days, right? It's crazy. All right, you can already see he's rising as we speak. So I'm going to let him rise too. Oops, forgot to brush him. Brush him down. And again, he would be on a parchment, and that way it would be much easier to clean up later. All right. So now, all right. On this tray, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to braid.
You want a parchment?
Yeah, I'm going to put it on a parchment tray. Where'd they go? Oh, there they are. So, where'd my dough go? Oh, here it is. All right. So I'm taking a big wad of dough, and I'm going to cut it into 3 and make it nice, as long as I can, like that. And then I'm just going to cut 3. One down, spread that guy open real quick. Spread it down again real quick. All right. And then basically, I'm going to start braiding. One over, one over. You're always going to alternate the outer piece of dough over the middle piece of dough, wherever that line, wherever the middle dough lines. Right there. That was the one piece, and now it's the middle. There we go. Okay, so that looks like Elsa from Frozen, right? Kind of a little bit thick down there. So what I'm going to try to do is kind of like kind of like make it level. So I'm thinning out up here because I got a little too thin down that way. Sorry, guys. There we go. All right. So there is the challah bread. If you would make a different bread, that's the style that you would decorate it in. I'm going to transfer that over this parchment. And once again, I'm always going to tuck the bottoms under because the bottoms take on a life of their own when it starts rising in the oven. Okay. So, you can do things, whatever you want with your bread. It's really very easy, whatever, you get creative. You don't want to add super wet ingredients. Like if you would take canned pineapple and throw it in there, if you didn't dry it with some paper towels, it's going to get soggy in the bread. It's going to not bake the bread well. When you get mozzarella, if you do want to make like a stromboli or whatever, you have to get low moisture mozzarella. Most of the times, skim milk mozzarella is going to be low moisture. The richer it is, sometimes it just disappears completely in the bread, so you don't want that. All right, so I'm not going to let you sit here and wait for all this time for rising. So what I'm going to do later on is take pictures of these guys when they come out of the oven, but I'm going to show you what the bread looks like when you take it out. So this was a cinnamon bread that I made before, and we're going to just cut it open just like this. Oh, you hear that crunch? So good. All right, and then this is what the middle looks like. So where I added the M&Ms before, for this bread, I added cinnamon and raisins. So that's what that looks like. You know, you can drizzle it with a little butter, and that tastes delicious too. Or you can smear some butter on here. All right, and this is a standard Italian bread. So when it comes right out of the oven, it's nice and crunchy and firm. All right, if you save this till tomorrow, it's going to soften up. But that doesn't mean you can't just throw it in the oven for another couple of minutes and then it will crust over again. All right, but fresh bread is meant to be eaten right away, so it's not going to last a week in your home. You want to eat it over a day or two. So I think I covered everything that I wanted to. We're baking the breads at 400 degrees for about 25 minutes. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask me, and I'll be available, and I'll be checking my Facebook over the next day or two.
And we're going to post the recipe and the after pictures for your little bear and everything else.
Okay. Have fun, guys. The kitchen's a great place to be. It's the subsistence of our families and of ourselves. So don't let this craziness of the world get nuts. You're safe in your kitchen. You have a little bit of yeast, some flour, and some water, and you're all set. Have a great time.